It was a freezing winter morning, the kind where even the bravest souls hesitate to step outside. Snow covered the streets in thick, suffocating layers, and the icy wind cut through every coat like a blade. Officer James had been patrolling the outskirts of the city, where the quiet was deafening and every sound seemed amplified in the hollow chill. He had almost decided to turn back when something caught his eye, a small shape shivering violently in the snow, tied with a frayed rope to an old, rusted post. At first, he thought it was a stray, abandoned and alone, fighting against the biting cold. But as he stepped closer, his heart tightened. It was a dog, a medium-sized, golden-brown mix with matted fur, trembling so hard that it seemed like the snow itself could not reach it. Its eyes were wide, almost pleading, filled with a mixture of fear, pain, and something else, something almost human in its desperation. James approached cautiously, his breath fogging in the cold air. He called out softly, "Hey there, it's okay, I'm here." The dog's ears perked slightly, but it didn't move. It was as if it had been waiting, hoping, praying that someone would come. The rope around its neck was tight, digging into its skin, frozen with the ice and snow. James' instinct screamed at him to untie it immediately, but there was something in the dog's eyes that made him pause. And then he saw it, a faint movement under the snow, something hidden. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, or perhaps a pile of frozen leaves. But when he brushed it away, his blood ran cold. Beneath the dog, partially covered by snow, was a small, trembling child, no more than 7 years old. She was lying there, unconscious, her lips tinged blue from the cold. The dog had been keeping her warm, curling its body around her tiny frame, refusing to leave her side even as it shivered itself. Without a second thought, James lifted the child gently into his arms, brushing the snow from her face. "Stay with me, sweetie. You're going to be okay." The dog, still tied to the post, whined softly but did not move away. James quickly untied it, wrapping it in his coat, and together they rushed to his patrol car. The warmth inside was shocking after the freezing cold outside, and both the child and the dog slowly began to relax as if sensing safety for the first time in hours. At the hospital, the child was rushed in, and nurses immediately began treatment for hypothermia. James stayed by her side, petting the dog, whose coat had matted with ice but whose loyalty had not wavered. He couldn't help but wonder how long the dog had been out there, guarding her, refusing to leave her alone even in the harshest cold. It was a bond forged not by blood but by instinct, courage, and something far deeper, love. Hours passed. The child's color returned, her breathing steady, and finally she opened her eyes, blinking at the bright hospital lights. And when she saw the dog curled up beside her, she smiled weakly, reaching out with trembling hands. The dog licked her fingers gently, wagging its tail as if to say, "I've been waiting for you." The hours in the hospital dragged on like a slow-moving storm. Officer James had never felt time stretch so long. Every beep of the machines, every shuffle of the nurse's shoes, every tiny movement of the child's fingers felt like a heartbeat measured in eternity. He watched the dog, sitting loyally beside the bed, its eyes never leaving the child. There was something almost sacred in the way it remained still, alert, as if it knew that the moment was too fragile for carelessness. James's mind kept replaying the scene outside, the snow, the cold, the lonely post to which the dog had been tied. How long had they both been there? How had anyone overlooked such a desperate situation in the frozen outskirts? He asked the nurse quietly, "Do we know how long she's been out there?" The nurse shook her head gently. "It must have been hours, maybe more. If this dog hadn't stayed with her, I'm afraid she wouldn't have made it." James felt a lump in his throat. His gaze drifted to the dog's face, wet fur glistening under the hospital lights. Loyalty like this wasn't something he had seen often in his career, not the way the animal had sacrificed its own warmth and safety to protect a human life. It was devotion in its purest form, unspoken, unquestioned, unconditional. Hours later, the child stirred, opening her eyes with a sluggish blink. The first thing she saw was the dog's familiar face, golden brown fur matted but still radiant in its determination. She reached out with a shaky hand, and the dog responded immediately, pressing its wet nose gently into her palm. The warmth of that touch seemed to restore her spirit, even as her body trembled from exhaustion. Through broken words, she whispered, I was lost. I couldn't find my way home." Her small voice barely carried, yet it was enough to stir James's heart. He held back tears, nodding. "You're safe now, you're okay, and look at this hero here," He saved you. The dog wagged its tail weakly, as if acknowledging the compliment, but its eyes remained alert, scanning the room as if ready to defend her again if danger arose. It wasn't long before the police began investigating the child's disappearance. Her parents had been frantic for hours, searching the snowy streets and calling every hospital, every shelter, every emergency line they could think of. When they arrived, their relief was overwhelming. Tears streamed down their faces as they embraced their daughter, barely noticing the icy wind or the snow outside. But the moment their eyes fell on the dog, their expressions shifted from relief to astonishment. The mother knelt slowly beside the dog, tears running freely, and whispered, "Did you save her?" The dog's ears perked slightly, and it pressed its head against her hands, as if confirming what James already knew. The child, now stable and recovering, hugged the dog with all her small strength, burying her face in its fur. The room seemed to glow with something that couldn't be measured: gratitude, love, and the undeniable bond between human and animal. James watched silently, realizing that sometimes, the greatest heroes don't wear badges. They don't patrol streets or chase criminals. Sometimes, they wait quietly in the cold, sacrificing everything, simply because it's the right thing to do. And sometimes, it takes a moment like this to see it clearly: a life saved not through training, not through rules, but through pure, unwavering courage. As the snow outside began to melt, the dog remained by the child's side, its loyalty unshaken. And in that hospital room, a quiet understanding formed between the three of them. The dog would always protect, the child would always remember, and the officer would always know that the world, for all its harshness, still had moments of inexplicable grace. The next morning, sunlight spilled softly through the hospital windows, reflecting off the remnants of snow outside. The child, now awake and alert, reached for the dog as soon as she saw it. The dog, sensing her excitement, wagged its tail with renewed energy, a gleam of pride in its loyal eyes. Officer James stood quietly to the side, watching this quiet reunion, feeling a warmth that the freezing streets could never have offered. The parents, still overwhelmed with relief, finally took in the full story. They knelt beside their daughter, hugging her tightly, tears streaking their cheeks. Their gaze then fell on the dog, and they realized something profound. This was not just a pet. This was a guardian, a silent hero who had risked everything to protect their child. The mother whispered through sobs, "We owe you everything, you saved her life." The dog's head tilted, its ears flicking, as if it understood every word. James finally approached, kneeling down to pat the dog. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "Most people wouldn't have survived out there alone, not in that cold. But you stayed. You saved her." The dog leaned into his hand, its body still slightly shivering, but its spirit unbroken. There was no pride in its eyes, no desire for reward, just the quiet contentment of duty fulfilled, of a promise kept. Weeks passed, and the child recovered fully. Her parents, recognizing the unbreakable bond formed in the snow, decided that the dog would remain a permanent part of their family. They named him Shadow, for he had been a shadow in the storm, a silent protector who never left her side. Shadow adapted quickly to his new home, but those who visited could still see a glimmer of the wild loyalty in his eyes, a reminder of the snow, the cold, and the night he had risked everything for the little girl. Officer James continued his patrols, but he never forgot that morning. Every so often, he would drive past the home, seeing Shadow in the yard, the child laughing beside him, and he would smile quietly. He knew that sometimes, heroes are not recognized with medals or headlines. Sometimes, they are furry, four-legged, and have eyes that speak volumes without a single word. The story spread quietly through the town, how a dog, tied and abandoned in the snow, had saved a human life. People who heard it would shake their heads in disbelief, some moved to tears. But James knew the truth: loyalty like that could not be measured in words. It was seen in actions, in courage, and in the kind of love that refuses to leave when danger approaches. Years later, the child would never forget Shadow. And Shadow, ever faithful, would remain by her side, a living testament to the idea that bravery and love can appear in the most unexpected forms. The bond forged in the snow was eternal, unspoken, and unbreakable, a promise that neither time nor circumstance could ever erase. As night fell over the town, Shadow lay curled beside the girl's bed, watching over her just as he had in the cold, white streets so many years ago. Officer James, now retired, would sometimes recall that moment and quietly say to himself, "Not all heroes wear uniforms. Some wear fur, and their hearts are bigger than the world." And in that quiet room, with snow melting outside and warmth inside, a small child, a loyal dog, and a grateful officer shared a moment that would remain forever etched in their lives. A reminder that love, courage, and loyalty often arrive in the most unexpected packages.